Let's get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time. And take a listen to this answer.
Everyone sees the carefully polished image, the public figure presented on stage. But what if the truth lurking beneath the surface is far more complicated, even shocking? What if a brutal takedown by figures like Megyn Kelly and Kirk peeled back the curtain, exposing a reality many never saw coming? This isn't just political sparring. It's a deep dive into accusations that challenge everything you thought you knew.
Say, hey, when there's a problem, you call a man. The Democrats can't even tell you what a man is.
So when you hear Walz brag about how much of a man he is, what does that tell you?
I think there might be a little bit of a cope there, you could say. There's a little bit, he has to remind us how masculine he is, trying to not even be able to load a shotgun or fix a truck.
The first significant crack in that carefully constructed facade revolves around claims about his military service. Questions arose, sharp and pointed, directly addressing statements about carrying weapons in war zones. The issue? Accusations surfaced that despite the uniform worn for years, actual deployment to a war zone never happened. A campaign official suggested a simple misstatement, yet critics and veterans didn't see it that way. They saw a dangerous line crossed, a line many call stolen valor, arguing that misrepresenting such service dishonors those who truly stood in harm's way. This wasn't a minor gaffe. It was presented as a fundamental challenge to his credibility, right where many expected him to be strongest.
You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools.
I'll tell you one thing. The most masculine thing that someone can do in America today is stand up for women that are not able to stand up for themselves.
Right.
So while Tim Walz is going on Gavin Newsom's podcast, attacking me, by the way, saying that I'm a bad guy, well, I'm sorry, Governor Walz. One thing that we don't have in common is, unlike you in Minnesota, I, every single day, am actually fighting for female privacy in locker rooms and that women's sports will not have men in them. Real men stand up for women when they're not able to stand up for themselves.
But the claims went deeper than just a verbal slip about combat experience. The scrutiny sharpened around a specific point in 2005, when allegations emerged of him abandoning his post just as his unit faced an upcoming deployment to Iraq. According to those leveling these serious accusations, this act was more than just leaving a job. It reflected a deep personal deficit, an act labeled by some veterans as the moral equivalent of unthinkable betrayal. The language was stark: coward, quitter, someone who turned back on their unit, their fellow soldiers, and the nation for personal comfort and safety. It wasn't just about the past. It was about whether someone accused of such profound failure could ever be truly trusted in a high office today.
And the idea that you said that you were in war.
Yeah.
Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This is a sacred trust. In the spring of 2005, Walz walked away from that sacred trust, abandoning his post when he learned of an upcoming Iraq deployment. This is Senecal Pubula saying this. He is a coward. According to this Twitter feed, he is a quitter. And every veteran I've talked to thinks that Walz is close to betraying the country by doing it.
Moving beyond his past military claims, critics zeroed in on his present political persona. He wore the everyman label, aiming to appear like a folksy leader who deeply understood the struggles of average citizens. But Megyn Kelly, known for her sharp takes, dismissed this image as consultant-approved nonsense wrapped in second-hand sincerity. She argued that his public act didn't scream authenticity. It screamed careful political packaging. This disconnect became central to the critique. A man who campaigned on unity and transparency, yet allegedly governed with confusion, shifting blame like a child caught in a lie, and avoiding accountability at every turn. His leadership approach, they claimed, boiled down to announcing vague plans, dodging tough questions, and holding press conferences that somehow answered none of the critical points raised.
What Walz did is the moral equivalent of a mother dropping off her 5 preteen children at an orphanage in the dead of night so that she could run for Congress. Yes, it is that bad. This was more than just abandoning troops. It also reflects a major personal deficit in his character and makeup. By the way, this is written by a veteran.
Then came the cold, hard numbers of the state's economy, where Charlie Kirk stepped in with a powerful critique. He painted a picture of fiscal policies that seemed designed to drive businesses away faster than a sudden winter storm. Taxes were up, regulations were described as wild, and economic growth felt stagnant, like a swamp under a summer sun. The argument wasn't just that the economy struggled, it was that the policies actively punished the private sector, prioritizing the creation of government jobs while making it harder for businesses to thrive. The message was clear: prosperity wasn't being built, it was being stifled under a heavy governmental hand.
And the idea that you said that you were in war.
Yeah.
Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar's not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my...
Perhaps the most intense scrutiny, however, fell on his handling of a global crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. Critics like Megyn Kelly dissected his response, arguing he acted more like a part-time virus expert with a full-time fear machine. Lockdowns came down hard, but allegedly applied selectively, crushing small businesses while allowing larger corporations to skate through relatively untouched. Schools were shut down, impacting countless students, while bars somehow received capacity waivers. The accusation was pointed. This wasn't science driving decisions. It was politics cleverly disguised in a lab coat, prioritizing headlines and political convenience over consistent, effective public health strategy and economic reality.
Tim Walz then lied about it to run for Congress and acted as if he was on the front lines. And people in Walz's battalion died. People under his supervision died. If Master Sergeant retired Walz could not be trusted to fulfill his duties he had to his soldiers, his unit, and his nation in 2005, how can he be trusted to be vice president in 2025?
As chaos erupted on the streets, the critics watched closely, observing his response to the George Floyd protests that devolved into riots. The accusation here was one of delayed, ineffective action. Cities fell into turmoil, police forces were overwhelmed, and the National Guard wasn't called in until the damage was already irreversible. Charlie Kirk mocked the idea that the governor was simply waiting for more information, suggesting it looked more like waiting for someone else to clean up the mess so he could potentially take credit later. This hesitation, this perceived stalling, and the let-it-burn approach, as some described it, painted a picture of a leader more afraid of political fallout than the actual destruction unfolding. This fed into the broader public safety critique. law enforcement allegedly demoralized and undersupported, crime rates climbing, and policies seen as soft, creating hard consequences for citizens living in affected areas.
What kind of bullshit is that? No, you don't, sir. We don't lie about military service we didn't actually perform, like going to war. We don't steal valor by saying that we had a higher rank in the National Guard than we did. We don't run around saying we served in Operating Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan when we didn't. We don't stand and watch somebody say that we were in combat in Iraq when we weren't.
The failures, according to these critics, weren't limited to the streets or the economy. They extended into the classroom and the cultural landscape. As a former teacher, his record on education came under fire, with claims of dramatic drops in student performance in key areas like reading and math under his leadership. Instead of implementing significant course corrections, the focus seemed to remain on virtual learning and less on practical solutions. Beyond education, critics like Megyn highlighted his alleged tendency to play both sides of sensitive social issues, appearing like lukewarm soup, lacking conviction, and ultimately pleasing very few. He was accused of enabling what critics called radical agendas, while pretending to be a voice of moderation, allegedly hiding extremism behind a local accent, seemingly answering more to his party's talking points and progressive trends than to the concerns of everyday citizens.
Podcast attacking me, by the way, saying that I'm a bad guy. Well, I'm sorry, Governor Walz. One thing that we don't have in common is, unlike you in Minnesota, I every single day am actually fighting for female privacy in locker rooms and that women's sports will not have men in them. Real men.
Behind all these specific policy criticisms and character challenges, a pattern allegedly emerged. Critics described a cycle of announcing vague plans, dodging accountability when things went wrong, and holding carefully managed press conferences designed to avoid genuine scrutiny. This wasn't seen as honest leadership, but rather as a tactic to manage optics and escape consequences. Examples cited included resorting to calling behavior knuckleheaded only when confronted with a newly unearthed alleged lie, such as a questionable claim about being in China during the tragic Tiananmen Square events where hundreds lost their lives. His carefully curated media appearances, avoiding tough interviews unless the script was approved, were painted as a form of political art designed to hide the reality. Critics argued this created a culture of complacency, where mediocrity became policy, failure was simply reframed as a transition, and every disaster was met with a carefully worded press release that blamed the system, never the leadership at the top.
Yourself from that clarification. And then here's two pieces of this that are really... I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves. And I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak like we do. I speak like regular people.
So, what does this cascade of criticisms reveal? According to voices like Megyn and Charlie Kirk, it exposes a profound disconnect between the carefully crafted public image and the reality of governance. It's a narrative built on alleged contradictions, exposed failures, and a pattern of sidestepping accountability. The polished facade, they argue, has been stripped away, revealing a different portrait entirely. It's a picture not of an everyman leader bravely facing challenges, but one, in their view, of someone struggling under the weight of office, resorting to image management and evasion. The curtain, they insist, has been pulled back, and the truth, uncomfortable as it may be for some, has undeniably stolen the spotlight.
And for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This took chutzpah. Let's go through it. You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record. He keeps doing this. Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't, actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel.
Again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children.
Disgusting, repulsive, and reprehensible examples of abandoning one's unit, of turning back on country and instead for own personal comfort and safety that we have ever seen in politics. And it's far worse than I even think people are describing it. It is worse than stolen valor. It is abandoning your fellow soldier.